Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Little Rock, where love is our teaching and service is our prayer. I'm Jeannie Brown. I'm a longtime member of this church, and the thing that I'm most proud of right now that I'm involved with is our once-a-month Young at Heart lunch, and it's a really warm, wonderful time to be with other UUs and have a good meal, so second Tuesday of the month. If you're a newcomer, we're glad you've chosen to join us for worship. While you're here, please stop by our guest table to fill out a guest card and pick up some information about our church. I now invite our illuminator, Amanda Goldbeck, to come forward and light the chalice and lead us in our affirmation of covenant, which is printed in your order of service.
I light this chalice with these words. Open our eyes to see what is beautiful. Open our minds to learn what is true. Open our hearts to love one another. Please join me now in the affirmation of covenant, which you will find printed in your order of service, saying,
Love is the doctrine of this church. Quest for truth is a sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve humankind in fellowship, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. Thus do we covenant with each other.
The ghost of our collective experience of isolation, of social distancing, of fear and uncertainty about how to protect ourselves from the COVID pandemic haunts these chaotic times, highlighting and hiding behind the contrast between that quiet world in which an invisible killer silently lurked and this noisy one in which visible violence and institutional cruelties are empowered. In isolation, many of us rediscovered forgotten things of the Spirit, the ways that diet and exercise contribute to spiritual well-being, and how our use of and relationship with time can nurture and deepen our contemplative experiences. We got back in touch with our creative selves, with the neglected parts of our lives. Oh, for a few days of isolation again, we might feel these days, quite understandably. Also, in that time, many of us clung closer to our dearest beliefs and values. For some, that looked like isolation and social distancing. For others, it looked like resistance to authorities who, by shutting down the world and telling them what they must and mustn't do, were introducing chaos into their lives. Now, those who had quiet faith are in the resistance, and vice versa. The shoe is on the other foot. And perhaps the difference really is in the kind of faith we have. As I left a follow-up appointment with my dietitian on Thursday, I stumbled into one of those awkward UU moments when a conventional Christian wants to know what we believe. After we set my next follow-up appointment, the lovely, chatty woman who does the scheduling asked me what church I served. She knew I was clergy. And I told her, and then came the question, what is that? What do you believe? As I often do, I approach the question by keeping the focus where she put it, on belief. I said, we don't have a creed, we make covenants, our members' beliefs are diverse, and we focus on values as a bridge between different beliefs. To me, that's all standard, uncontroversial stuff. But to her, mind blown. But how do you worship? Do you believe in God? I held my ground. Some do, some don't. We focus on the values, and the central value is love. I sounded more and more like a politician as the follow-up questions came one after another. Some do, some don't. I said that many times. By the end, she was offering her belief about God. God is love. I can affirm that as part of our tradition. And then I learned something about her personal faith. She said that God is love, and so the commandments and the teachings of her church are like guardrails to keep one from straying into harmful habits or situations. Those guardrails are an expression of God's love. And I could affirm that we need good guardrails. But how can you have them when you all believe different things? I held my ground. We focus on values as a bridge between different beliefs. And then I told her where the church is and what time our services are. And she was welcome to come and see how we worship and how all this works. And soon I was on my way. I could tell that what she wanted was a sense of what authority we follow. That was important to her. It's not faith in her mind if there's no authority. Many years ago, James Fowler, now of blessed memory, who was a professor of theology at Emory University, researched and wrote about what he called stages of faith. He identified correlations between certain kinds of religious belief and attitude and human developmental stages. That's what he meant by stages of faith. We all know we change as we grow, right? So he named 6 of these. The first 2 were stages in childhood. Very young children approach faith intuitively through images and stories, and then older children develop a literal, mythic faith before they develop a robust capacity for abstract thinking. These generally consolidate in a commitment to certain authorities, a church, a mentor or leader, a scriptural source, a doctrine, something or someone they can turn to as an authority. And Fowler said many adults carry on in that sort of faith while they get on with the demands of what we are now calling adulting. That's what that lovely chatty scheduler described. Fowler called that conventional faith. Now, beyond this conventional faith, starting in adolescence for many people, comes a stage of developing a personal faith. This is how our Unitarian Universalist religious education and exploration programs for older children and for youth are focused to support the questions young people start to ask themselves and want to talk about. How do things we say in church tally with what I think and feel and have experienced? In this more personal mode of spiritual reflections, one's own experience and inner life are granted their due of authority in spiritual life. That's what blew the lovely chatty scheduler's mind. Some of the authorities in here. And beyond that comes what we develop in beloved community, what Fowler called conjunctive faith, where an awareness of different perspectives extends, complicates, and deepens the parts of our beliefs and commitments that, to begin with, rested on personal reflections. And beyond that, Fowler theorized a universalizing faith not only transpersonal in the way I just described, but transcending even cultures and traditions toward something universally human. Now, however that might be, we can step back and recall the famous words of the beloved Unitarian theologian James Luther Adams, who said, "An unexamined faith is not worth having." That, of course, is a variant of the famous words attributed to the ancient Greek philosopher Socrates, "An unexamined life is not worth living." Both Socrates and Adams meant to say that we grow through our questions and through our freedom to ponder them and discuss them. For Socrates, we are told the examined life was an actively conjunctive exercise pursued in community. Examination for him looked a lot like courtroom cross-examination. Taking up questions about values, he would challenge others' ideas about things like piety, wisdom, courage, justice, or love, and draw out the inconsistencies and shortcomings of their beliefs, driving the conversation toward a puzzle or impasse, a doubt or a conundrum. He pursued this practice out of religious conviction. When he was in his early 30s, before his philosophical career began, the Delphic oracle proclaimed that no one was wiser than he was. That's heady news for a young adult. When he heard this, Socrates thought, well, either that means that everyone is equally ignorant, or maybe it means that the fact that I'm aware of my ignorance is in itself a bit of wisdom. What I do not know, I do not think I know. So there he was, you see, on the boundary of conventional and personal faith, and he knew it. How did he know? Socrates spoke, at least he is reported to have spoken in Plato's Apology of Socrates, about a divine something, usually experienced as a voice or a sign, that warned him of danger or mistakes, but didn't tell him what to do. He seems to have meant something like a conscience or moral sense or an intuition. But the Greek word he used, daimonion, indicates something whose nature is in between those of divine and human beings. Maybe he meant that this awareness of his own ignorance was a gift from the gods. In Plato's dialogue, The Symposium, a wise priestess teaches Socrates about the nature of love, which she says is also between the natures of divine and human beings. Love, she says, is an important daimon, a semi-divine messenger that, like every divine something, is between divine and mortal. Do you hear something familiar in that idea? At one of the worship services last month at the UUMA Institute for the Learning Ministry, my colleague Sadie Lansdale said something in her sermon to the effect that we Unitarian Universalists may have quibbles about God or about Jesus, but nobody can rival our unity about the Spirit. Which I heard as affirming what I've come to think through my experience in our congregations, that if there is a God, it's the Spirit, the divine something. We do seem to know what we mean by Spirit, even if we have different ways to name it, and some of us aren't sure what people mean when they talk about spirituality. We seem to be clear about the spirit of life and love, justice and peace. A divine something tells us so. Yes, that's the Spirit. Yes, that's the Spirit. Yes, that's the Spirit. A divine something tells us so. Or love is at the center there is love. Love is at the center there is love. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve humankind in fellowship, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine something. That is our faith. And thus do we covenant with each other. That is what democracy looks like. And it is what beloved community looks like. We know it when we see it. And I still think Mary Jane Walkinger said it best during what? A worship service? Of course, not a congregational meeting. Back in the 1980s or 1990s sometime, at the congregation I belonged to back then, she said, "Never before in the history of the world has there been a religion where people who believed different things worshiped together." May we stand by this faith and invite the mind-boggled to come witness it being lived. Amen.
All right. I invite you to remain standing as I invite Amanda back to extinguish our chalice as we join together and sing our closing words. Go out into the world in peace. Have courage. Hold on to what is good. Return to no person evil for evil. Strengthen the faint-hearted. Support the weak. Help the suffering. Honor all beings.
And may we keep growing spiritually together.
Amen.